Hello, doers, builders, and shapers of tomorrow. You're all conductors of the world of work. Welcome to the Workestration podcast.
Hi, Donna. Hello.
So good to see you, Stela.
Good to see you. We're back at it. So who are we talking to today?
We are talking to Yelena Mammadova, and Yelena leads AI transformation strategy for Microsoft's workforce and work intelligence products. She holds a doctorate in education from USC's Rossier School and previously led the skills transformation and initiative at McKinsey, where she pioneered using generative AI to map and assess skills. She just returned from Davos 2026, which is very exciting. And she's a rare leader that really bridges, the science of learning with AI product strategy and enterprise transformation.
So excited. Let's dive in.
Hello, doers, builders, and shapers of tomorrow. Welcome to the Workestration podcast. We're super excited to have you, Yelena. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, Yelena, you are just back from Davos. It's hot off the press. What are some of the insights and impressions from all the conversations you've heard, all the people you've met? What is the world talking about, and how should we look at this 2026 year trajectory for AI and beyond?
Well, I'll start just by saying this is Davos is a place where there's so much beautiful energy and that concentration of the topics which you really want to discuss, having this diverse set of perspectives of the leaders who get together there. But if I had to maybe summarize some key themes which resonated with me. One is very grounded AI talks. So I was frankly surprised by the degree of the pragmatic approach to this discussion. Everything from what's AI's real world constraints, energy, the ROI, the broader kind of societal impact, rather than just a hype. The second big theme was this leadership, the role of the leadership in the era of, as they called, uncertainty. And this is actually the space that I spent most of my time in. And the term that kept coming back over and over is this radical uncertainty. So what is the role of the leaders where the need is to have this steady guidance and while we're going through this rapid change? And then the last but not the least is the gap between technology and all that it offers and people readiness. So that tech advancement and people readiness gap is very real. And at times we acknowledge that there is a need for workforce retraining, reskilling, however we call it. And the human adaptation is absolutely necessary and it takes time. So these were maybe the three main themes. And I can talk about each of them, but I think that what particularly stood out to me in that conversation is when, in fact, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said, I'm paraphrasing perhaps, is that AI success needs to be judged by society. It cannot be just a tech company focus, otherwise we're in a bubble. So the productivity gains that we are expecting from AI should be assessed by healthcare, education, small business, and beyond. So it needs to prove its real world value, or it will risk losing the trust and credibility in the society.
Each of those three themes, I think, can be a separate podcast. I know we'll barely scratch the surface, but if I may indulge in a few more details. So practical applications, I think it's time, right? We've all had a couple of years of experimentation. We figure out what works, what doesn't work, limits of technology, limits of organizations to integrate fast enough into the workflow. Now we have some lessons. We need to focus on building the solid infrastructure on top of a lot of those processes. Leadership, though, is a very interesting one. The radical uncertainty that's driven by political environment, by the economic changes and transitions we're seeing. But it also speaks to the leadership capacity to manage such volatility. So if we are to translate this to what it means for HR, did anyone even talk about HR and what it means to develop leaders that are able to manage all of this volatility? Does anyone care about HR in general?
Oh my God, Stella, this is such a good question. Um, so interesting question, because I don't know if HR stood out as the function, right? So the HR as a critical enabler of that transformation, but I'm not sure if there is even at this point any other, if you will, driver of that change. HR to me is really becoming, it's not the executor of the or implementer of the change. HR is becoming the transformation. And to your point, maybe to answer your question more specifically, HR did not come up in the conversation. Perhaps what came up more frequently is that how we ensure that when we talk about AI, we are not creating AI decorated companies. We are creating AI powered organizations. And in that vein, the process redesign, which you just talked about, so we can actually start talking about AI in context of the workflow and really think about this shift to AI around the work. That's the role that HR plays in the sense of driving this work redesign and helping organizations to adjust. So I think that in that context, it's very clear that this is the opportunity for HR to truly drive this or enable this change. And secondly, in the context of this leadership uncertainty, I think that this is not just HR. It's every single organizational leader who is facing this moment. And one of the CEOs actually mentioned something that also might be worth sharing when he said, I know we're focusing a lot on entry jobs and the fear that what we do about the entry jobs in this era of continuous change where augmentation or automation in some instances can have a significant impact on entry-level jobs. But there's also impact on mid-level and even senior level jobs in a sense of this is AI started shifting or rather challenging their identity, because AI is about expertise or challenging at times the expertise as well. So really thinking holistically at the system level, the AI impact and the role of the leadership here to stand out and basically say, I need to be calm. Realism is becoming really, really important leadership skill, and acknowledging that we are really learning along this journey and that sort of calmness while uncertainty is absolutely something that everyone probably feels. I think HR could also play a big role in almost creating that safe space for these conversations among the leaders.
And I think that ties into the readiness that you talked about, like the technology versus the organizational readiness. It's helping the leaders help their teams to get ready, creating that space and maybe changing different parameters by which performance is defined, by which quality output is defined, by which risks are managed. So the readiness is not going to be a training course, right? It's going to be multiple things in HR that have, where HR has the opportunity to influence and technology can enable. But at the end of the day, it's a human change all around. Anyway, let's dive into you and what you do. And you recently changed roles. You were always in HR, in consulting roles, and now you actually moved into the product, into customer-facing roles. So tell us a little bit more. What does that mean? What do you do on a day in and day out? Because we categorized you in the builder bucket. You are actually building or helping organizations build new products and offerings. First of all, you're a woman, and we have to celebrate everyone who is technically apt, as well as bringing the empathy and the aspects of femininity into the workplace. We were just reflecting with Donna earlier that we should bring more women into the podcasts and give the stage to them. So thank you for doing that. Number two, you are really bringing both the workplace perspective that previously was not part of the technology development conversations, especially at Microsoft, says this is a huge workplace technology that we all use, and what you have the opportunity to influence is just tremendous, because the ripple effect of that will be felt by millions and millions of users. So tell us more about it.
Well, Stella and Donna, first of all, thank you for creating the space for builders, leaders in every function and in every capacity to have the stage to speak, to share, because I feel like indeed this is great and this needs to be encouraged even further. And there's so much more to learn from each other and in this journey of supporting each other. With regards to my role, I like to introduce myself often that I am a builder. I'm a builder in a sense of I work in this kind of intersection of where the product strategy and workforce transformation meet each other. And honestly, the more I think about it, the more I realize that I don't know if I could do this work well without the other anymore. So it's no longer a Venn diagram for me. It's actually one connected circle. So let me just explain a little bit what I mean by that. We're constantly thinking about what's possible. So how to build the tools which are powerful, intuitive, scalable. And but the real question is possible for whom? Who we are building these tools for. And because if we're not designing AI with that user end in mind for whom we are building these tools, is it a frontline worker? Is it a manager? Is it a knowledge worker? We risk building those tools which are technically brilliant, but back to our earlier conversation, readiness-wise, user readiness-wise, they are not practically usable. And when I think about this workforce transformation angle, it's not just about reskilling how people can use new tools. It's really thinking about how we should reimagine and prepare the people to use those tools and use them with comfort and with trust and really help them see how the product can unlock something for them. And when I think about product strategy, I am not the AI engineer or I'm not a data scientist, but what I think about product in context of workforce transformation is when we build this product and offer this product, what does it unlock and what kind of friction it can introduce? Because the friction should be envisioned or anticipated, if you will, and that's where change management, organizational preparedness, leadership behaviors come into play. So to sum it up, when I think about AI transformation and view it almost as a product, and then there is some sort of doing of transformation, I see them really, really connected because good product could be built. But bringing this product into the ecosystem and helping organizations to adopt the product, this is where system thinking, leadership behaviors, change management come to play. And maybe more tactically, just to clarify what specifically I work on. So I'm looking at the AI workforce transformation angle. So how organizations that ask the question, how do I future-proof my talent? How should I redesign my organization? How should I be better prepared, or how should we be better prepared for all the changes to come? The products that help to answer the questions about what type of talent do you have? And even not understanding the talent, but interpreting the talent that you have in service of where the business is heading. That's a set of products that we are building, what we call people products that answer the question of talent, and not necessarily talent visibility, and more about interpreting talent in service of that transformation.
I love that. As a fellow person I started my career actually in product. I think with your background and your experience, and we'll dive into that in a second, because I have a follow-up on what you just said. I think it's kind of the perfect combination because, and you said it so eloquently, like product solves problems and introduces others. And you always are thinking about that user, buyer, whoever is that human being on the other side of what that experience is. And so I know we mentioned, but your doctorate is in education, and you previously have led skills transformation at McKinsey before coming to Microsoft. And so how does the science of learning lens for you with your education background, when you think about
any organization. It's just vague, but how do you think about AI adoption and companies but thinking of the science of learning at the center?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question and a good moment of reflection as well, because in the same vein, when we talk about AI in terms of tech readiness, the real unlocking is in people readiness. And if I take this kind of education lens, if you will, what we always say or teach in learning is that learning isn't about content delivery, right? It's about context. It's about motivation. It's about cognitive load. It's about transfer of skills on the job. And if I apply that lens to AI, you can start seeing how actually this is all connected. Maybe same analogy, like if I just cannot hand people a new AI tool and expect that they will use it effectively. They need to understand how they can use that in context of their work. They need to have a motivation to use it in a sense of they can see the real efficiency gain, or they can see how agent that they're using helps them to maybe brainstorm a couple of ideas that they are exploring. So that is very similar to how we talk about learning in that context. The cognitive load piece, which I wanted just to maybe take a moment on, because, and tying it back to Davos conversation as well, there is a lot that's happening. There's a lot that's happening in the sense of it's hard to keep up with the speed of change. And I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was Demis Hassabis who even said that as a builder, I cannot keep up with all the tools that are being, made available. And his recommendation for recent graduate people who are at school today to actively experiment with these tools. But where I was heading with this is this cognitive load of all incoming information, all these tools, is not necessarily well aligned with our biology in the first place or information processing capabilities. I think this is where it's a bit challenging. There's a reality that we need to give time and space for people to adopt or to use these tools, to see the value of these tools, and then really become the advocates of this tool. And that's, to me, that gap of tech readiness and people readiness is. And I don't know if there is a solution to that other than maybe creating that safe space for experimentation, for failure, for really having the environment that any setbacks, even in the use of this tool, in many ways is actually a step forward or failure forward. Because by learning, by doing, by failing, by experimenting, by pivoting, iterating, that's the only way how we can really do this right, with bringing people along the journey, as opposed to expecting this change to happen by virtue of deploying really good tools that might be out there.
Super helpful. When you were on the Red Thread Research podcast, huge fan of Red Thread, by the way, you talked about some work that you did at McKinsey where you distinguished between observed, declared, and inferred skills data. Now with AI, there's so much inference that happens with people even realizing, especially employees. How does that framework hold up as we think about AI and transformation and just like framing skills?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Red Thread Research as well. So thank you for bringing the question that we explored with them at the time. And it's just a good moment to reflect indeed what has changed since then, and maybe things that are still the same in many ways. So that concept of the framework of observed, declared, inferred skills, look, we designed it to reflect in many ways, different ways, how we understand what people can do, right? So declared skills is what employees share and say that they know. Observed skills is more that we can tap into content or documentation or assets that can validate or demonstrate that someone may have some skill. And then inferred skills is really, we are deducing from the patterns that we are identifying from their project work, from the tools that they're using, from the language that they have in the documents. So I don't think really that framework has changed. But what changed to me more is the power and recent advancements with AI in how powerful that inference layer is becoming. it's much more powerful and more complex. So AI can surface skills that employees may have not declared, right? They may have not even realized that they have them. If someone perhaps has spent some time in writing technical documentation, we can see some adjacency or even have higher degree of probability that if you have this high quality technical documentation writing skill, you may actually have system thinking skill, right? So this is the power of AI inferencing that creates this space of unknown, not immediately visible, and it's getting only better and better. That doesn't, of course, eliminate the importance of architecting it all in the right way. What are the right data sources that we're using? How we are inferring the skills. And then at Microsoft, for instance, if I'll bring that as an example, we are absolutely focusing on work activity as the source of signal and not necessarily your resume or, things that may have been reported from 10 years ago. So really inferring skills from what you do is, to me, is a powerful way of fast understanding of skills that employee may bring. Now, of course, this raises the whole new set of questions. Just because AI can infer something, should we act on it? So, and I would like to draw the line, right? So this is not necessarily the fact that AI can infer translates into now we act on this. And this is where obviously some guardrail, the governance, the processes need to be put in place within the organizations. But to sum it up, framework is the same, technology is stronger. And to me, change management is also becoming absolutely critical for people to understand how AI is actually inferring all this data so that we could build trust with them. And the last but not the least, for leaders who are the beneficiaries of all this information, all the skills that have been inferred, to almost change their mental models as well. One of the anecdotes I can share when we presented the inferred skills for the team of one of the leaders, there was the surprising moment of like, he didn't want to agree with this. It was like, if I haven't seen it in practice, I don't want to believe in it. So it's a really this kind of change management of explainability, transparency, and ultimately user agency in all of this data that we are surfacing, and the guardrails, the processes that are in place within the organizations to use this data in context of talent decision-making processes.
You already addressed one of the questions I had, so I'll skip to the next one. So this is more related to the comment you made earlier, and I love the term interpreting your talent. This is the holy grail of people analytics practitioners. Can we see insights and understand data in a way that does not require number crunching, at least not for the analytics people, especially in HR, but you have the broader context, contextual data about the work activities and observing people in the wild, so to speak, to derive some conclusions. So if we think about the customers and practical use cases, what type of unlocks can customers now get? What type of problems now they can solve by utilizing some of this data and seeing their talent in a very new and more nuanced way?
Yeah, I think so, Stella, there may be just a few things here to name. One is, and I'll start with the basics. We have in HR organizations, we have had this challenge of fragmented data in the first place. Just even having all this fragmented data converted into something that can help us to solve not the talent visibility problem that I find that a lot of organizations are starting with. It's again, talent interpretation problem that they need to go after. And it takes a while just to have that from to conversation that can we look into interpretation in a sense of if someone's job title, tenure, maybe whatever, their last performance rating, that's all available information. And it's, let's say, visibility. It answers the visibility question. We have that data. But what it doesn't tell us, and that's the unlock where I'm getting to, is what the person is actually capable of doing next, perhaps, or where the opportunities are, that the skills, just because someone has certain skills, what are the opportunities for this employee to move to another role, which is, let's imagine it's a net new role within the organization. So to me, what the biggest unlock is understanding the talent that organization has, and then mapping all this data to where the business needs are. So for example, if we're talking about talent redeployment as a scenario, it's a big topic today, sometimes called talent mobility, sometimes called talent redeployment. But this is, for us, it's a big topic because in the era where we know that some jobs are getting eliminated, like this is unavoidable, this has been happening always, but maybe now at its peak in many ways. But at the same time, interestingly, when we know that the job eliminations are happening, we also know that there are lots of jobs that we are opening. And then this is a very practical, maybe, example. We let people go, and then we are actually on the journey of finding new talent. And the bigger question in terms of understanding talent is, can we think of this actually taking the talent that we have and with the skills and capabilities that they have, think of reskilling opportunity to move the talent towards where the new jobs are. So that's a very, very simple example. And in HR space, we know the cost of hiring, the cost of talent retention, the cost of letting go of people. So for us at Microsoft, for instance, this is a very, very real challenge that we are currently all are working on in terms of leveraging all these insights that we're gathering and thinking about intentional talent mobility. And just to bring the difference as well for our audience who may have deployed, let's say, talent marketplaces that many organizations might have. These are I call them organic talent mobility platforms, right? So agency is with employee. There's an opportunity to search for the next gig, next project, next job. That is great. But at the same time, the pressure is real today. And when it comes to a lot of organizational movement that needs to happen, the intentional talent deployment is a perfect example where we have interpreted talent and created reskilling paths for them to take the job that is actually open. And that can convert into so many millions of dollars of saving and morale of the company and motivation of employees and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Obviously, Microsoft is both building AI tools externally, but of course, adopting internally at scale. What are you learning from what you're hearing from employees' themes as they've adopted what you're deploying and kind of learning the future of the roadmap, just in general strokes?
Yeah, Donna, I would say that first of all, we have this wonderful kind of opportunity that any tools that we build, we can test them among ourselves. So we call it as a customer zero. So and there's real-time feedback to understand what the good looks like, where the opportunities are for improvement, and so on. I wouldn't say that the lessons learned or what we've learned is very different from what we may have heard from some maybe early pilots with our customers. The same in a sense of adoption isn't just about the access. It's about context. So that's number one. So employees don't just adopt AI tools just because they're there. They really want to understand how those tools can help to solve their real world problems that they're working on. And then that's how the trust is built. The learning curve, which I already talked about, the learning curve is real. And it's always humbling to speak about this as a representative of tech company and then actually just having the same sentiments from our people. Like, I need time to learn them, create the space for me to learn, especially when there is an expectation of certain performance deliverables, so on and so forth. So the same kind of questions about how do we create the space for people to learn, experiment, fail forward. And maybe if anything also interesting, because we've when going back to this people skills conversation, when we launched our people skills product internally, so all those skills were inferred from the work activity signals, we were expecting lots of questions with regards to, or lots of activity on the user side to continuously go into the tool and make the change and have their voice kind of, in terms of, no, I agree with this skill on my profile, or I disagree, which they could just take an action on. What happened was that it was a matter of transparency and explainability of how we deployed those tools and all the agency that we gave to our people, so that we could see that kind of arc of access, checking, using, and then starting to build the trust, and then the level of activity in terms of making the changes to the skill profile has started to decline. And that was a good sign. That was a sign of, we were seeing the trust that the people were building with their skills data that they were seeing on this platform, always knowing that they can take an action in terms of changing everything from type of a skill on their profile all the way to even visibility of their skills data. So these are kind of the main kind of learnings for us as well. Culture and transparency probably are the biggest drivers of any tech deployment with an organization, including at Microsoft.
Makes complete sense. And just a quick follow-up on skills, because I think it lends itself well to what you just said. So World Economic Forum, as we all know, has a very specific definition of a skills-based organization. Do you think most organizations, enterprises are actually that? Or what is your perspective there? Because it's definitely a word the last 10, 12 years companies have been discussing, but where do you think we are as a society?
So the way World Economic Forum defines a skills-based organization is basically that we prioritize skills over jobs or roles, and how we hire, develop, deploy, and reward talent. So I think that we have a lot of organizations that said, yep, I want to become skills first. So I think there is a buy-in to the concept, but the constraint by legacy systems and infrastructure and mindsets is still very real. The momentum is there. But I think it's the understanding that just by building skill taxonomies, we are not becoming skill-based organizations. Or if we're running a pilot only in one part of the organization or applied to a particular use case, let's say in learning and development space, this is localized. This is not systemic. To me, the hardest part, it's not the technology, it's the operating model shift. So moving to a skill-based approach, it's rethinking how we define the work, how we assess people, how we match people to jobs, how we promote them, how we advance them, how we deal with all that. How close are we? I think we're still in the early phases. The ambition is there, the language is there, but the muscle memory of job-based thinking is still very, very strong. And I'm hopeful. I'm very optimistic in a sense of, if we start shifting the conversation to work redesign, we can come much closer to what the skill-based organization is.
Yeah, what I hear from that is that how organizations currently operate today, the processes, which of course drive our beliefs, how we interact, et cetera, are really constraining us. And until we throw away job descriptions and job postings and the constructs in which we do so much, specifically in the HR and people space, it's almost like that redesign has to happen at the same time as the great skills work that a lot of companies are doing. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
We talked at the macro level. We talked what Davos World, the wisdom they brought to the universe in 2026. We talked about Microsoft and your work within it. Let's talk about you at the personal level as a user of AI. What are the most recent use cases for yourself personally that change completely how you do your own work?
Oh, I am a huge fan of Researcher. The Researcher agent cannot imagine, frankly, a day in a life without researchers. Asking questions, framing the problem, how, if I zoom kind of back, if you've heard about how Eric I always struggle pronouncing his last name, so my apologies. Björhörsson talks about the change in the way how the workflow is now set. So there's a problem statement, there is analysis done, research done, and then there is perhaps even execution of how you solve this problem. And then there is oversight by human to how the execution happened. So I'm finding myself more and more in this really well problem statement kind of domain. So really sharpening even further my human skills for critical thinking in terms of what is the problem that we're trying to solve. Ask all the right questions about the problem. Then I start engaging with researcher. And there's a little bit of a dialogue that's going on between us, right? So if this is a problem, what are the questions I'm not asking? What are the other angles through which I can explore this? And then I'm asking it to give me some maybe, further insights in terms of how this problem could be solved. So it's always, it's a bicycle of the mind, I call it. So it helps me to kind of explore and brainstorm. But there is absolutely all the time human oversight, i.e. my oversight and critical thinking. And that's a thing we should preserve at all costs, which maybe takes me to the second example. I am in the process of writing a book. So this is where there's a lot of back and forth between me, researcher, in terms of even the uncharted territories of how I'm thinking about certain dilemmas. And that's a really good partner. And I would absolutely encourage everyone, especially if you're in HR, if we're the ones driving the change and we understand humans and how people think, if we do not use these tools ourselves, it will be very difficult to drive change with conviction.
What keeps you up at night? And 3 years from now, we wish we had started today.
Yeah, that's probably the toughest question, especially when I'm just fresh from Davos and this humbling kind of state of unknown. I think if I had to guess, there are a couple things. One is we've overestimated job replacement and underestimated job recomposition. So we put all our efforts and all our dialogues and all our frameworks into this conversation about job automation. And we kind of inadvertently did not pay enough attention into how actually we can be talking more about job augmentation and how the tasks are changing and shifting. So the key question, which jobs will disappear? It's an important question, but I would love us to start asking which tasks will be unbundled, reshaped, recombined. So that's one thing that keeps me up at night. The second is maybe when we confuse AI adoption with organizational transformation. So we talked about that quite a bit. Again, we assume that deploying tools would naturally lead to the new ways of working. I don't think that's going to happen. And then maybe if anything, well, on the skills front, I would say that if we start framing skills-based organization too narrowly, so we really spent a bunch of efforts in skill taxonomy development, while the real skill-based organization is the ability to learn, unlearn, and recompose skills all the time dynamically. And the last is if we believe that the future of work can be engineered. And I know maybe it sounds perhaps thought-provoking, but if we think that we put a lot of roadmaps, frameworks, that would give us the control, I think that's not the answer. I think that the real transformation is not digital, it's cognitive and cultural. And in that vein, one of my favorite, actually, thought leaders in the space, Martin Gutman, said that nicely. Let's just be very, very mindful of how we are redesigning or how we're talking about the redesign of the work, because we can inadvertently impact the very nature of what makes us work as humans effectively. Not every waste is a waste. Sometimes it's a glue of how we work as humans, and we need to preserve that too. So on that note, I would say that we are in this kind of phase or era of re-engineering, and let's just be very, very cautious of and conscious of who we are as humans and why it's important to look at this era not through the tech lens, but through cognitive and cultural change lens.
Love that. So if I am to quint and find the theme of this conversation, it's forward. We have to create a safe space for people to fail forward, to experiment and learn from, because that's where the best learnings come from. We have to give them agency to do that, because that's how we build trust and give them, or do it with transparency to amplify that trust. We have to make intentional talent mobility a priority, because that helps them see the future forward and see themselves and how their career can progress. More importantly, I love the bicycle analogy, because in order to stay on your bicycle, you have to move forward. You have to embrace it. You have to think how you can continue to stay in balance. And more importantly, look at this as a transformation of culture and cognitive transformation more than a technological transformation. Yelena, thank you so much. This was absolutely a brilliant conversation, and we can't wait to share it with our audience.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to all the podcasts that you are hosting. I think we all are learning from each other and building on top of each other's thoughts.
Onwards and forward.
Onwards and forward.
Thank you, Yelena.
Here. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. The Workestration podcast is an exploration in the evolving world of work, driven by the fundamental questions: where is work going? How can we make it better? And how do we get there? By engaging with diverse perspectives from doers, builders, shapers, the podcast aims to provide a comprehensive understanding of the future of work.
You've been listening to Workestration, hosted by Donna, Scarola, and Stela Lupushor. Music by Philippe Visitiu. Everything else we're doing ourselves, because someone has to walk the talk on lean operations. Find show notes at workestration.ai. Follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If this episode sparked something, leave a review or share it with someone trying to solve the same problem. Want to be a guest? Book time at workestration.ai. Thank you for listening.